So can I start? It's not quite 6:30. You let me start now. So I teach marketing here, as many of you know, and digital marketing also. And it just seemed to me that a lot of people are saying that they're disappointed in their digital marketing. And I have to say I'm a bit disappointed in the way digital marketing has kind of gone. I wrote a book about digital marketing with Kent Wertheim, who's COO of Ogilvy Asia. And we did that about 6-7 years ago. And we covered the whole of digital marketing. And we kind of thought we were sort of like Renaissance man, like Vitruvian man here. We could become experts in the whole area. Now, of course, the whole thing is so big and confusing and changes so much that it's bewildering, I think, for everyone. And I guess the whole presentation really can be summed up in this slide. That the golden age of doing anything is when most people weren't doing it. The golden age, I think, of digital marketing was when most people weren't doing it. And I don't know if you know when the first digital marketing was. It was in 1994. If you think back to 1994, can you remember 1994? Well, Evan can, just like yesterday, right? And I can. And this was the very first banner ad, supposedly. And this was an advertisement for AT&T in the US. And it was part of an integrated campaign. And it says, have you ever checked your mouse, clicked your mouse right here? You will. And that was a campaign that went across print as well. And this website, which is kind of poorly rendered here, this was the Wired magazine website, which at the time was called hotwired.com. And that was 22 years ago. And the click-through rate on this banner ad was 44%. Almost 1 in 2 of all the people that saw it clicked it. And of course, there's a lot of reasons for that. There was a lot of novelty. The whole site only had 6 advertisers at the time. It was part of an integrated campaign which covered print magazines as well. And it was intriguing and resonated, I think, and it was very, very well placed. So the people who read Hotwired website would be very interested in this. And of course, the punchline is click-through rates now are at best 1 in 1,000. So we've gone from about 1 in 2, 22 years ago, to 1 in 1,000 now. And many people would say 1 in 1,000 was a good click-through rate now. And that kind of sums up digital marketing disappointment. The IAB in the UK just actually said these are the guys responsible for promoting digital advertising, and they actually came out and said banner ads don't work. And we've actually not only taught people not to click on the banner ads, we've taught them not even to look at them. So these are heat maps showing where people's eyes went on the page, and of course they totally avoid any areas where they think there might be advertising at the top and on the right here. So we've actually conditioned people not to look where ads might be. And not only that, we've actually kind of shot ourselves in the foot, because one of the reasons the click-through rate is so low is we've actually been overstating the number of impressions. So the click-through rate is the number of people, the percentage of all the impressions that got a click. What's an impression? Well, you would think an impression was when somebody saw the ad. Well, you'd be wrong, because about 33% of the ads could not in fact be seen. So in fact, people had scrolled down the page before the ad was loaded, or it was they'd switched to a different tab, or they'd switched to a different page, or the ad was loaded below the fold, and they never scrolled down at all. So in fact, we've been kind of cheating people by charging for impressions that were not delivered. And just now we're moving to a new concept, viewable impressions, where 50% of the ad have got to show in the viewable portion of the screen for at least 1 second. Now, it seems to me that's not a very challenging definition, And that might be a very, very fleeting impression, 1 second to see half an ad, and you're counted as an impression. There is one bright spot, and that's video on mobile. So video on mobile, we're still getting about 12% click-through rate. Any idea why? Sorry? It's so new, so we're back to the novelty. Anything else? When you guys...
Their mobile devices bring on their board, doing the sky train.
So people are looking at the mobile device, they have nothing else to do. You guys all use Facebook, right? And you all see it on your mobile. So they're on automatic play. So Facebook's doing very well with automatic play videos. So that gets your attention. And they're also what we used to call a roadblock. So essentially they fill a substantial part of the screen and you have to scroll past them. And I don't have any stats on this, but I firmly believe a lot of people click them by mistake. So you're trying to scroll past the bloody thing and you click it. And so we get a 12% click-through rate. And of course, as with most things in marketing, we immediately start to kill the goose that's laying the golden egg. So video on mobile is the golden egg, and if you look, Facebook now, most of their profits are coming from mobile, and most of that is from autoplay video ads on mobile. And we're kind of swamping people with them. And what's the result of that? Well, first of all, we're starting to admit that Facebook is really not a vehicle for doing social media marketing. It's a vehicle for advertising. So organic reach, the ability to escape from your brand page to be seen on users' news feeds is now very, very low. It's fallen by about 50% over the last couple of years, and I think the stats are that if you post on your brand page, when Dean posts on the SASIN page, about 3% of the people that like the SASIN page will actually see that post. In other words, free organic reach is almost gone. Now, Facebook will tell you that's because there's so much stuff on Facebook now, they have got to filter it. Dean is posting so much that they can't send all his posts out. It would overwhelm you. Some cynical people think it's because they want you to take out paid advertising instead of a free organic reach. And that paid advertising has become pretty much the same as display ads, pretty much the same as the old-fashioned banner ad, but very, very targeted. The ability to pinpoint audiences, which we'll talk about in a moment. And again, typical marketing reaction is how can we make our advertising more intrusive? How can we make it harder for you to miss? How can we hit you in the face with it? That's the way marketers are conditioned to think. And of course, as this happens, what do users do? They don't like the autoplay Facebook video ads. They don't like the banner ads, particularly when they get to be big and in your face, so they install ad blockers. How many people here run an ad blocker? Go on, you can confess. See, the interesting thing about ad blockers is not only have they tripled over the last year, but the people that are most likely to use them are the heaviest users of the web. So if you go to a gamer site, there's probably 90-odd% of visitors that are using ad blockers. I use an ad blocker. Max uses an ad blocker. Most people who are in their right minds use an ad blocker because we don't want to be bothered with all this intrusive advertising. Ad blockers are about to move into mobile space, so the new iOS makes it much easier to block on mobile. And this is really what's going on. Forbes site, for example, is devoting about 75% of the screen to advertising. And that's not just 75% of the screen, it's also 75% of the bandwidth. And if I, like many people in Asia, are on some sort of metered package, so I'm only got 200 or 300 megabyte per day, then this is eating up my allowance. I'm actually paying to have these advertisements delivered. Now in a magazine, it was the opposite. The magazine, I didn't like the ads, but at least I knew it was helping to keep the price of a magazine down. Here it's helping to increase my internet costs. And if you go to Forbes with an ad blocker, as I did, it produces this very nice little screen. This is a haiku to ask you, please turn off your ad blocker, love Forbes. And that, of course, made me immediately turn off my ad blocker. Not. And then we get into a war of measures and countermeasures. So there's at least two companies, PageFair and what's this one called? SourcePoint, who are actually peddling technologies to get around your ad blocker. In other words, you're trying to block my ads. If I'm an advertiser and I go through one of these services, they will get my ad into you even though you've tried to block it. So measures and countermeasures. And I just last week read this, that at the DoubleClick Leadership Summit, which Google ran in Ireland, which of course is digital advertisers and the people that create advertising, 23% of the audience admitted to using an ad blocker. So rather higher percentage than we have here. And as Frederick Villot points out, the same people that are selling the ads are actually themselves blocking the ads, which kind of tells you something is not quite right. So we've taught them to block, and if they can't block, we've taught them to skip. So if you look at pre-roll commercials, those annoying videos you see on YouTube before you want your actual video comes, if you click to skip them, if you click in the first 30 seconds, the advertiser doesn't have to pay, which is nice, but the vast majority of people are in fact skipping them. Not everyone, but the vast majority are skipping those ads. And a few brands have turned this to their advantage. I think I showed you guys this already in marketing. This is my favorite, the Geico unskippable commercial.
Can't skip this Geico ad.
Commercial's over for the first 10 seconds.
15 minutes could save
And then
15%
what's
or
left
more on car insurance.
is just entertaining you. I've seen this so many times, and I still think it's really good. And Geico have a whole series of these. Yeah. So you've got it. The people are real. They're not statues, and you'll see them move. And this is, I think, by far the funniest. And really, again, this says it all, because this is what we should be doing. We shouldn't be circumventing your ad blocker and sneaking underneath it. We should be creating marketing that you want to see, that you find entertaining and you voluntarily watch. That's what I think the essence is. Then we have search. Search, of course, is massive. Search is the basic on-ramp to the internet. And search used to be a fantastic marketing tool. But if you look what is happening in search, the first Google index was in 1998. So that's just a few years after that first banner ad. And that first Google index had 26 million pages. So your website maybe has 20 pages, you were 20 out of 26 million. The next 2000, a billion, 2008, a trillion, and right now we're at 60 trillion pages in Google's index. So it's really, really hard to get ranked towards the top of those searches. And yet at the same time this is going on, we're also finding that people's attention spans are shrinking, as Evan will attest, to about that of an insect. So attention spans are now down to, according to Microsoft, about 8 seconds, having fallen by about 1/3 in the last 15 years. What does that mean? Well, it means that people find it very hard to absorb a lot of information, and this survey points that out. Has your attention span decreased? Yes, no, wait, what was the question? Right? And if you see what that means for search, it means that 92% of people never leave page 1. The green line shows the percentage of people that click a result by page. 92% click on page 1, another 5% click on page 2. Almost nobody leaves page 1, and really nobody leaves the first 2 pages. And if you look at the position on the page, sorry, should have been another thing, 70% of the people that click on the first page click on one of the top 4 results. So marketers start to get very frustrated. How do I get into those top 4 results? There's all sorts of guys that will sell you snake oil to get you into those top 4 results. And of course, in the long term, that cannot be maintained. Why has all this happened? I think it's happened because people have treated digital marketing as just a little extra something. You put in a pinch of digital, and that's going to make the whole thing perfect. And they have not thought about digital really the way it needs to be thought about, which has a different way of marketing. I think the digital audience is very different from the traditional media audience. We've already seen several differences. One is the ability to block. In traditional media, it's really hard to block. Print, very hard to block ads. TV, it's a lot easier, but print is very hard. And really, I think we've got to move away from the marketing of the 20th century and move into thinking about digital in a different way. And the first image I want to leave you with is this thing. Do you know what this is? It's a Trojan horse, the wooden horse of Troy. And if you remember the story, the Greeks were attacking Troy. They couldn't get through the walls, so they pretended to go away. And all they left was this wooden horse. And the Trojans went out, and they were kind of happy the Greeks had gone, and they saw this horse, and they thought it looked kind of interesting, so they dragged it into the city. And of course, at night, when they were all asleep, the Greek soldiers came out of it and killed everyone. And this is digital marketing. Digital marketing is creating Trojan horses that you voluntarily take into your mind, just like that Geico ad, and you voluntarily get the exposure, and then we hit you with the marketing message. But we hit you so gently that you don't even realize you've been hit. And that's really what I want to talk about. And that's all about creating a digital presence. Many people think about websites and social media and YouTube channels and Twitter and Line and Facebook, but I think your market actually just looks at the totality. They don't remember where they saw something, where they were exposed. It's just the whole totality. And our thinking about digital presence has changed a lot over time. So 15 years ago, we used to talk about stickiness. And we used to talk about websites being sticky. And that was Yahoo's big advantage, as I recall. So we build a website, we lure you in, and then we trap you there, just like the flies on the sticky paper. Now, gradually, we've started to realize that this is not the right way to do things. And we should be much more like a flower. So we attract you by our pollen. We have something that you want, that you're interested in, and you come and you take it away. And I think the first site to really grasp this was YouTube. Right from the start, YouTube has allowed you to embed YouTube videos in your own Facebook page or your own website or your own blog. They provide a nice little snippet of code, and they encourage you to do that. So they want you to steal their content, because that will mean the content reaches a wider audience. And you will probably steal content that you think your audience will like. So it becomes a way for me to reach a wider, relevant And so I'd like you to think about digital marketing as a series of attractions or lures for prospects. It's like fishing. You put different lures into the water at different levels, different types of bait, and you try to attract the fish. Now, many people call this content marketing. I actually hate that phrase because I always think content is what you find in no-name hamburgers, right? Content is not very nice, but that's what people call it. They also call it inbound marketing, the idea I'm attracting customers to me rather than going out to find them. I prefer to call it thought leadership or curation. Providing content which is interesting to my audience, which doesn't mean I have to create it all. All it means is I perhaps create some of it, and I pull together other content from other sources so that my digital presence becomes authoritative in a particular area. And that particular area is something that interests my potential clients. So again, I'm not in your face. I'm trying to attract you by giving you something that's interesting. Study after study after study shows that the most trusted source of information is recommendations from real friends and real family. There's absolutely no debate about that. And everything else is far less trusted. The guy who did this chart, though, puts a great title up here. Consumers trust self-selected content. And I think that's a key thing. I trust what I want to read. I trust what I chose to read rather than what is being pushed in my face. And so any marketing which involves pushing messages out is at a disadvantage to marketing that actually is providing something consumers want that they pull to themselves. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create content which consumers want to use and want to choose themselves. And it's quite a lot different from traditional marketing. Traditional marketing is by and large a short exposure with a very prominent brand. Whereas thought leadership, curation tends to be a much longer exposure with the brand being very low-key. If you look at GoPro cameras, it's a great example. So GoPro, most of GoPro's marketing consists of curating content which users of the cameras have created. They're just showing you videos that people have made with GoPro cameras. And at most, there'll be a brand logo on some of the frames, but usually not throughout the whole thing. And we're providing something which is really useful to the consumers. And it's often something which we used to sell. And this is often a sticking point. That if you want to give something that's really useful, you've probably got to take some sort of information or service or consulting that you used to sell and give that away for free. Because that's the bait, that's the lure. And of course, you want people to borrow it, you want them to take it away, you want them to use it on their sites and to share it. And of course, we have a brand, we build visibility, so even when people take our content, it still has our branding on it. Now, none of this is really new. Some of you may have heard of the Guide Michelin, which I think started in, what's the date on there, 1920 something. What do Michelin make? They make tires. So this is a guide to tires, is it? No. Of course, it's a guide to restaurants, which is very, very tangentially related to tires. But I think they've got a lot of publicity out of this. They've got a lot of brand exposure. They've got a lot of visibility. So that's number one. Number two, I'd urge you to avoid marketing megalomania. We marketers tend to believe we're very important. We tend to believe that consumers are really, really interested in marketing. We spend all our days watching marketing messages and marketing campaigns, and so we think consumers are really interested in them. Whereas, in fact, for consumers, the web is more like this newspaper kiosk, magazine kiosk. You see something, you grab it, or you don't. And you don't really think about it too much. It's a fleeting impression, and it's not that important to you. And yet marketers are very concerned to build relationships between consumers and brands. Most consumers really don't give a damn about your brand. And in fact, they don't want to form a relationship with it. Only 23% of consumers said they had a relationship with the brand. 77% said they really didn't care. And when they were asked why, they said, it's just a brand. It's not a member of my family. It's just a brand. It's really not that important to them. So try to avoid thinking that marketing is too important. I think we all know about market segmentation. And what's happened with market segmentation, these guys have all heard this before because I just did this in my marketing class. Market segmentation used to be like the segments of this orange, big things. Market segments have now become like the seeds in the pomegranate, little things. And because digital allows us to reach those very, very well-defined audiences, as we saw with Facebook, so segments can become much, much smaller. And that's one of the ways around a lot of the problems we've seen already. One of the problems of people not clicking on banner ads, not clicking on display ads, is that the ads are not reaching people that they're really interesting to. And the trick is to develop lots of ads aimed at very, very specific markets. I don't know if you know this product, Aura Brush. I'm sure it's one of Evan's teams that created this. Aura Brush is a brush to clean your tongue. Does it work? I have no idea. It is, however, patented. And the guy who got the patent spent many years trying to sell this thing using infomercials on TV and got nowhere. He then went and gave a presentation at a university to a set of MBA students, and one of them said, why don't you make videos for YouTube? And he started making videos for YouTube, and his sales soared. But he still had no distribution. And he really wanted to get distribution in Walmart. So they decided to target Walmart with their advertising. So the first thing they did was to spend $20,000 on advertising in trade magazines. What happened? They got lots of calls from trade magazines trying to sell them more advertising. Right? Then they decided to use Facebook. And they used targeted Facebook ads targeted at Walmart employers. Facebook, I can target you by employer. I can target you by location. So they chose Northwest Arkansas, which is where Walmart's headquarters are. They actually spent a total, oh, this is the ad. Walmart employees have bad breath. Walmart needs to carry Aura Brush. It will sell better than anything else in the store. They placed this ad only to be seen by people who worked for Walmart in Northwest Arkansas. It cost them a total of $28. One of the senior buyers at Walmart saw the ad. And he thought this must be a big company with a national advertising campaign. And he told his people, ask these guys in for a pitch. And he did, and they're now on the shelf at Walmart. So we can segment very, very finely. And this is also the way to get through the search results. As we saw, almost nobody leaves page 1. Most people never leave the first 4 search results. So how can we get on page 1? Well, we've got to be very, very precise. We've got to go out down the long tail. And the whole idea of a long tail is we have a small number of searches that are done a large number of times. Hotel Bangkok, I don't know how many times a search is done, but there's 4.8 million pages show up. There's about 20 ads on the first 2 pages. Whereas if I go further down the tail and I have a more specific search phrase, I get less competition and I get less advertising. Fewer websites show up and fewer ads show up. If I keep going out down the tail, I actually can narrow things down so that I'm competing with relatively few sites, so I have a much better chance of getting on the first page. And not only that, I also know a lot more about the prospect. So the guy who's searching for wheelchair accessible long stay backpacker hotel Bangkok, I know what to show that person. I know what to put on the page, and we know that the longer the search phrase, the more likely people are to be close to the purchase decision. So extreme segmentation. This is what a lot of marketers think of their audience. And what do we call these people? What do we call these people? You remember this. Sorry? Trampers. What do we call these people? Well, maybe the people are a bit fatter and the TV is a bit thinner, and maybe it's in color. But what do you call the people that you aim your marketing at? Targets. And it's actually a very descriptive phrase, because that's how we thought of marketing. We throw things at these targets, we throw messages at the targets, and if we miss, well, we throw more. Well, of course, today's customers are not passive targets. They're active participants. They're an active community. And that community, first of all, participates. And so if we can get them to participate with our brand, whether it's a contest or some sort of submitting photographs, submitting descriptions, anything like that, we get people to participate, and if we keep it on brand, the customer learns about the brand, and we learn about the customer. We start to pick up data on the consumer, and if we do it well, we encourage consumers to bring in other consumers. So we get a friend sort of environment. But a community does more than that. A community has conversations. And I really like this phrase, conversation is a new attention. I don't mind that you don't listen to what I say. I'd rather you talk about what I say, because then I reach a wider audience and I get more credibility. But when I look at social media, I realize that conversation is actually a big ask. I think it's more accurate to say that in digital, people answer back. I'm not sure we really have conversations, but I am sure that consumers get the chance to answer back. And I think that's very important to think about. And so the number one rule in digital marketing is don't lie. If you lie, you will get found out. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And the blowback from that will be very extreme. I always tell people don't delete. If you're in social media, you cannot delete posts unless they're illegal or defamatory or unacceptably rude. People will know you've deleted it. And once you delete something, you in fact bring more attention to it rather than less. Listen, of course, and again, it's been said we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen more than we talk. Very important in creating a community. And empathize. Empathize is a word that I think marketers use far too little. Empathy is all about being sensitive to another's feelings, to standing in somebody else's shoes, to experience the world in the way the consumer does. So again, we're not thinking about content. We're thinking about something which is genuinely useful to consumers. Some of you may remember Justine Seiko. Do you remember Justine Seiko? Justine Seiko was actually a PR person for a digital company, and she went on a trip to South Africa, and she had a Twitter account. It was not a huge account, 6,800 followers, and she tweeted from time to time, and before she got on the plane, she sent off the tweet, going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white. Now, this became the trending topic on Twitter. She was on the plane for whatever it is, 12, 15 hours. By the time she got off the plane, millions of people had seen this tweet, and she'd been fired. So really the empathy and thinking starts to become very, very important, because when you're in digital, you're communicating with potentially millions of people in a way which is very, very hard to change or erase. And of course, an active community shares. And perhaps that's the biggest payoff for marketing. If I can get you to share my message, I build reach and I build credibility. You don't believe what I say, but you believe what your friends say. And I think when you're trying to get people to share things, you've got to think of things that people will want to share. We know people share because it says something about them. When you share that viral video, when you share that joke, when you share that piece of information, you do it to build your own reputation, your own prestige, your own brand. And I think we've got to think of social media as a megaphone, a trumpet, to amplify the voice of our brand advocates. Some of you may remember the sales funnel. We've talked for a long while about consumers being aware, considering different brands, becoming engaged, becoming ready to act, and then taking action, buying. And we used to stop there. Then we started to realize that loyal customers become very important because they start to spread positive word of mouth to other potential customers. And so they become part of your marketing. More recently, we've started to realize we've been drawing this diagram the wrong way round. And it's not really a funnel, it's a trumpet, a megaphone. And this, I think, is the role of social media, to amplify the voice of our brand advocates. So if I can build a social media presence that allows others to speak on my behalf, then I really start to win. And we've also got to remember it's rude to interrupt. Marketers have traditionally interrupted. So whatever you were trying to do, watch the TV, read the magazine, I would interrupt you. I would interrupt you with advertising, with marketing messages. And we're starting to realize that's rude. We've got to go beyond interrupting what you're interested in and actually become what you're interested in, just like that Geico ad. And TLDR. What does TLDR mean? TLDR. You don't know TLDR? Too long, didn't read, right? Most marketing I see out there is way too long, didn't read. People's attention spans, remember, are shortening. You've got a matter of seconds. Unless the potential customer is extremely interested, they're not going to read through paragraphs and paragraphs. Finally, an active community engages. And engagement is a kind of interesting concept. It's like these cogwheels. They engage with each other. When one moves, the other moves. And I think that's an important part of digital marketing. People have got to be engaged. And yet, whenever I talk to a client about social media, they always say, how many fans can I get? How many likes can I get on Facebook? How many followers can I get on Twitter? And in fact, those are not good metrics. Those are just vanity metrics. So I agree, if you only have 10 followers, if you only have 5 friends on Facebook, it's a bit pathetic. And perhaps you should go out and buy some, but it really is not going to help you. So the thing that's going to help is engagement. And engagement means that people are taking actions that help to build your brand. And not every engagement is the same. If I have a picture of a cat licking its nose, I might get a lot of people click like. Is that really going to do much for my brand and my marketing? Well, unless I'm selling cats, probably not. So I would prefer to get engagement that actually pertains to my brand and what I'm trying to do. Because I think positive recommendations and reviews very definitely do build my brand and do help to create customers. And And we also are starting to see digital marketers paying people to write reviews, paying people to have their photograph taken with beer bottles, all of which eventually escapes, all of which eventually becomes known and backfires, I think, on the brand. We want to try to avoid paying people. We want to try to help them, to incent them, to give them something that's useful to them, but to try to stay away from straightforward monetary compensation. Some of you may have seen this book, Seth the Godin, All Marketers Are Liars. I have to say that many of us thought it was a bit true, but it was kind of not a very nice thing to say. And the second edition of the book, he changed it. So his second edition was not All Marketers Are Liars, All Marketers Tell Stories. And I think that is very, very true, especially in digital media. And it's stories that people remember, especially if the story is subtle. It's not just a straightforward marketing message. And I'm afraid a lot of people who are doing what they call content marketing, they're creating stories that are really very, very thinly disguised advertisements. And that's not a story. One of the best stories I've seen, one of the best non-overt marketing, is something which I'm sure you've all seen.
I've had my ups and
this?
downs, my fair share of bumpy roads and heavy winds.
Volvo trucks. I'm not
That's
going to
what
show
made
you the
me
whole
what
thing,
I am
but I will
today.
show you the start of it.
Now I stand here before you.
And it's actually illustrating
It's a body crafted to
a
perfection.
technical principle that Volvo
pair of
trucks
legs
have,
engineered
which
to
is the
defy the
ability
laws of
to
physics.
locate another
And a
truck
mindset
and to
master
drive
the
in
most epic
synchronization.
of splits.
So you get the idea. And of course, they have a whole slew of these. Now, that costs a lot of money to make that. But I think there are equally effective ones, which I think are made much more cheaply. Just 2 weeks ago, this came across my desk.
In 2014, on Cyber Monday alone, $2.68 billion in sales were made online. When we trade an asset or a thing for money, that's called a financial transaction. And when it happens over an electronic network like the internet, that's called e-commerce. Today, millions of things are sold online every minute. But how did we get here? What was the first thing sold on the internet? According to Pizza Hut, the first thing ever purchased on the internet was a large pepperoni pizza with mushrooms and extra cheese in 1994. So, I tried to see if that was true.
Thanks for calling Pizza Hut. Oh, so you didn't mean just Pizza Hut in general. You meant literally the first thing ever online, first purchase online.
Was from Pizza Hut, that's correct.
That is kind of cool if that's true.
According to the New York Times, while the first purchase online did happen in 1994, it didn't have anything to do with pizza or with Pizza Hut. To get to the beginning of the story, to the birth of e-commerce, we have to go back before the World Wide Web and before the internet. We have to go back to the ARPANET. When the ARPANET was started in 1969, it was started as a tool to help universities share information, ideas, and resources in a way that nobody had ever seen before. So the students had this amazing technology that gave them access to some of the smartest minds in the nation almost instantly. So what do you do with this kind of power? Well, if you're a student at Stanford, you buy pot. It turns out students from Stanford bought some marijuana from students at MIT somewhere between 1971 and 1972. But that can't be the first online sale. It was illegal, there was no
So is
actual
this an
funds
interesting story
exchange,
to you?
and it looks a lot more like an
What
instant
brand
messaging
do you
conversation than the way we
is the
buy
sponsor
online
of this?
today. So it wasn't that.
Any
But
idea? Sorry?
what about Jane Snowball?
Who? Not Pizza Hut. Not
In May of 1984, a 72-year-old British
Well, I'm
grandmother
going to spoil
named
the
Jane
surprise
Snowball
at the end. At the
bought
end, you're going to
margarine,
see
eggs,
it's
and
Shopify.
cornstarch using an
Some of
invention
you may have
called
heard of
video
Shopify. It's a Canadian
The
company
video
that
text is basically a
it's like
TV that
WordPress,
allows you to connect
but
your
for
phone
e-commerce
line to the
sites.
phone line of your
So
local
what they're
stores
trying to
to
do
place
is
an
to
order.
sell
Jane's
relatively
groceries were then
inexpensive
delivered to her door,
e-commerce
where she
sites.
paid for them in cash.
And this would seem to me
That's
to
a
be
pretty
the ideal
wild
story
way for
to
grandma
try
to
do
buy
that.
groceries
I don't
in
know how much they spent
1984.
doing this. my guess is the
But the
budget
video
is not
text didn't break the
enormous.
mainstream.
But
The
my guess
technology
is
just
that
wasn't there yet.
anyone who's
And that
interested,
wouldn't
anyone
change
who's
until
likely to set
1994.
up a Shopify
3 years
site
after the
would find
internet
this
is
quite
started by
interesting.
Tim Berners-Lee.
And
But the key
voluntarily get
pioneer
exposed to
wasn't
it,
Pizza
then
Hut.
right
It was
at the
this
end,
guy.
Hi,
you'll see
Dan
the
Kahn. Is that
general
okay?
Who ran
branding
what was
of
probably
Shopify.
one of the earliest web startups.
So NetMarket was an internet startup that I was doing with 3 friends. When we launched, we were really one of the very first websites. The web was incredibly new.
And of course, he remembers the moment on August 11th, 1994, when his friend bought a Sting CD in what was the first secure online transaction.
We got tons of reactions of just saying, you know, you're doomed, this will never work, AOL is going to own e-commerce. And then, you know, lots of things like it's just way too hard to set up internet access. And just to be crystal clear, it was really hard to set up internet access at the time. So they weren't wrong, but it just required a tiny bit of imagination to say, hey, this stuff could get easier over time.
Which was actually a pretty big deal, because until then there was no real safe way to transmit your credit card data online. Dan and NetMarket opened the floodgates for what would become a billion-dollar industry, taking us from buying a simple CD to buying almost anything online. And that is how we got here.
Just a gentle bit of branding and a link right at the end of the video. You're providing something which people in your target market, people that are likely to buy your product, would find interesting and informative. And of course, the final thing, the great thing about digital is we can test everything. So we can test, we can improve, and we can test again. We definitely should have an analytics system that enables us to see what people are doing on our properties, what they're doing on our digital presence, and we should hire somebody that can analyze that data, and we should listen to what they say. We need to tag all links so that I can accurately determine where my traffic is coming from and what it's doing. And basically, we build, we measure, and we learn. So what I'm suggesting is that digital has been a disappointment for people that have tried to take traditional marketing and dump it into digital media. I don't think you can do that. I think what we've got to think about is a Trojan horse, doing things that people want to have, that they will bring into their mind, bring into their lives, and then we do our marketing. We're thinking about the total digital presence. We're avoiding being megalomaniacs in our marketing. We're trying to use extreme segmentation, targeting very small segments, a series of very small segments. And we're trying to build a community, not an audience. So you guys are an audience because you haven't said anything yet. But perhaps you will soon. I can see Evan's still awake, which is always a good sign. We're going to tell stories because they're memorable and get passed on. And we're going to test, improve, and test again. And my favorite quote, supposedly from Charles Darwin, but there's no actual written record that Charles Darwin ever wrote this. It's in the notes of a student at one of his classes, but we know that student notes are notoriously inaccurate, so it may well never have been said by Darwin. It's not the strongest that survives, and God knows it's not the most intelligent. It is the one most adaptable to change. And digital marketing is all about being adaptable to change, and new marketing methods, new marketing media will be emerging all the time, but we've got to think in terms of things that are useful for our consumers, rather than things that interrupt our consumers. And I always like to finish with a quote that actually doesn't seem to be working very well, so I won't finish with that. Okay, thank you. Any questions? No? Good. The last thing, for some reason the fonts are screwed. It says the future is already here. It's not very evenly distributed. And it's from the Canadian science fiction writer William Gibson. But for whatever reason, the font's gone wrong. Any questions? Dean has a question. Yes?
You said if we were going to advertise the product, we would avoid paid advertisement.
Yeah.
So
Right.
How would you move?
Right.
With this?
They're all moving to what they're calling content marketing. So what they will try to do is to create what I would call information rather than content. They're trying to create stories, information around your brand, which will appear really as editorial. And so the distinction between editorial and advertising, which used to be taught as being so, separation of church and state, will be gone. And we can already see it happening. So Wall Street Journal, for example, is running stories that are commissioned by advertisers. I think the concept of advertising in 50 years' time will seem very, very quaint.
Give an example of that. You say an editorial.
Wall Street Journal ran a piece. What do you call that series they're showing on about drug smugglers in Uruguay, Panama, or somewhere, and Wall Street Journal created a story around this, and they're very happy because the story is factually correct about the history of this, but it was all paid for by the channel. That's
And how did they insert their brand or something into the story?
it's just the only brand is at the top. It says story sponsored by, but the story is about the plot of the series.
Another example of that is locally is Coconuts Bangkok runs as occasionally sponsored by Sun Series, which is a property developer, and they do neighborhood pieces. So what's hot in whatever neighborhood where they happen to have a property development.
Evan.
This is an extension of the don't trust the purveyor. Purveyor's going to push. And I talked the other day in class about astroturfing. Is this astroturfing here where it looks like real turf?
No, it is real turf. So it's not astroturfing. The Wall Street Journal story is a real story. So the editor of the Wall Street Journal is very proud of it. So he's on record as saying he would only allow stuff to be printed that they would print in the newspaper. It's directed in the way that the client has asked for. So
Years ago, cigarette companies would approach academics and say, would you do some research, put it in the journal, proving that cigarettes don't hurt you? That sounds like pretty much corporate sponsored.
correct. That's actually a better example. So yes. So the content is rigorous, meets the standards of the vehicle that it appears in, but the content was in fact initiated by a brand rather than just by a reporter.
Seems like it'd be easy to miss the brand as a reader.
Yes, it could be easy to miss the brand. Yes, and that's one of the costs we pay, because if a brand is big and bold, then you turn the page, you switch to a different website, and so I've got to somehow lure you in. I've got to have my brand message, but I want it to be much more subtle than it used to be.
There's also going to be a distrust of brands because the bigger the brand, the bigger the price premium they have and so on. So we're thinking big brand probably means inflated price. And people search not by brand but by category. So if a brand pops up there, you think, oh, I'm not interested in that so much because it may not be the value proposition.
That's why I have lots of little brands that you don't recognize as being part of a big brand. The beer company strategy. So,
Do you have any data on the effectiveness of participation? As in, if you make one person participate, on average, how many people that you would?
no, because a lot of it depends on how the participation occurred. The best example, I think, is, I think I showed one in the class, the Samsung phone, didn't I show that? Where they had people, it was in New Zealand, and when they launch new electronic products, very often the brand's greatest advocates line up outside the store overnight. And they decided that was really a waste other brand advocates sleeping in the street so as to get the first phone. So they created a virtual lineup. And you would move along that virtual lineup according to how much you spread the message about the phone. So the more people that you spread the message to and who then spread the message on, the further you would go up in the line. So you actually build an incentive for people to talk about your brand, for people to share that information. So they got a lot of sharing. There's another one which sticks in my mind, which is Volvo Facebook game. And it was a Volvo which was positioned on fuel efficiency. And the whole point was to pass this car to it could drive 200 kilometers on one tank of gas. So you would pass the car, the virtual car, to a Facebook friend who lived within 200 kilometers of you. They would then pass it to a friend who lived within 200 kilometers of them until it had gone around the world. So it was very effective in luring more people into this game because you had to have friends to be able to complete the game. And of course, the only people who bothered to do it were people that were interested in fuel economy. So I'm building a very specialized audience. Dean has a question I can see. Oh, Nick's trying to drink his wine.
There was one thing you said, too long don't read.
Right.
And I've heard an alternative theory is that by making something longer, requiring more of a time investment, you're kind of filtering out the people who are not going to buy anyway.
Right, that's true. That's true. And in fact, too long didn't read. I guess what is too long depends on how motivated the audience is. So I agree. Some people believe long items, and then I have the call to action at the end. If I get all the way down there, then I'm very motivated. Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Advertising is, as long as there is conversion and it covers the cost.
Yes.
Do you still see that as effective advertisement?
Well, I mean, if I'm getting conversion that covers the cost, then yes, by definition, it's effective. And some people say that, some people point out to me that click-through rates of even a tenth of a percent are actually, can be quite profitable. So it depends on what I'm selling, depends on what the conversion rate I'm getting, and what the margin is. Amazon spend a fortune on display advertising, on banner ads. They get very low click-through rates, but it's profitable for them.
So at the end of the day,
it's not going to happen.
I mean, at the end of the day, the metric that you should look at is not really click-through rate or impression, but it's mainly trying to get to the conversion.
So I've got to look beyond the click-through rate to the conversion rate and to the margin I get per conversion. But if ad blockers continue to march on, and there's every indication they will, so some browsers are now building the ad blockers in, I'm never going to see that ad. And you're probably going to finish up paying for it, even though I didn't see it. So conversion rates will deteriorate even more.
Every kind of crowdsourced quality. We've got everybody's opinion, 3 stars, 5 stars, and so on. Kind of crowdsourcing some endorsement of quality, rather than have the company tell us this is the best thing.
People are actually moving towards artificial intelligence rather than crowdsourcing. So there's a project in the UK which is actually a dynamic advertisement. So the advertisement changes depending on the click-through rate. And so they're running multiple ads, different variations, and automatically, as one gets more clicks, the others imitate it. And so it's kind of like a breeding program of advertising. And so the idea is that in the end, advertising will be self-creating, as it were. Scary proposition. Anyone else? Yes?
Can you talk more about the food maker
Right.
One of the methods that is widely used in the site.
Right.
What
So.
other tools do you have for like how you keep on building and developing?
Okay, so A/B testing is just having two variations. So half the time I serve one advertisement or I serve one web page, half the time I serve another web page, and Google will manage all this for you. It's kind of a stupid name because I don't just have A and B, I have C and D and E and F as well. So I've got variants, multiple variants, and I can rotate them, and I can build into it that automatically the most successful gets increased in the percentage of time that it's shown. So the idea is you always are testing something. That's what I was trying to talk about in the last item. So you're always testing at least 2 versions, 3 or 4 versions, and you're always improving. And digital is really good at that. So it's relatively easy for me to create those variants, and it's relatively easy for me to compare them. But if I do that within the display advertising environment, in the end, I will finish up with the best display advertisement I can have. But personally, I don't think that's ever going to get anywhere near the sort of curated content reach. So you can tweak the display ad, and some display ads can get much higher click-through rates than I've shown you. I've shown you average. Some get much higher than that. But I don't think you're ever going to get into the levels of getting into the mind that you can with so-called content marketing, curated content.
Is there any way you can refer this testing with the curated content?
Anyway, sorry?
You can implement the testing concept with the curated content?
Yeah, of course you can, because you can, if you can create different variants, then you can test them. So I can have different versions of a story. I can change the prominence of the branding. So if you're concerned people might not recognize the brand, I can have one version that's heavy on brand, where the brand actually gets mentioned in the story. I can have another version that's light on brand. And then I can compare which one gets read the most. And I can even look at what those people do if they come to my website. If I'm doing e-commerce, I can actually relate the different variants to the sales results in the end. We can do that with tagging too. So tagging will show us the source of the traffic. So Dean does tagging for SASIN, right? And what do you find?
Well, you could tag things according to what the content is, not just the source or the medium or where it comes from, but also the actual words that you use in a Facebook post or whatever. So that could actually become part of the tag. So then you can use Google Analytics to see how many people actually click on that particular wording of that particular ad or post or whatever.
So if he mentions cute cats at SASIN, he can compare that to its mentioning Evan Douglas at SASIN. Yeah.
For the same strategy that you say that you test and retest, for me, I'm an engineer, it sounds like a design process, which is very painful to me. So would you comment about that, or would you just want to say that we have to be adaptive?
I think it can be very painful. Actually, I think marketing is moving from being very qualitative and spending money on buying media to being very quantitative and spending money on analysis and, as you say, the painfulness of the execution. So particularly if you get to the long tail search, I was talking about the search phrases, or we could call them advertising phrases as well for Google AdWords. We'll be managing thousands of them. Because as we go out down that long tail, we get more specific search results, but we get fewer people doing those searches. So to make up the volume, we have to have a lot of search phrases. So there are companies with hundreds of thousands of search phrases. So as you say, it becomes a painful process of managing these and trying to automate the process so that the ones that are most successful pop out, and we get more phrases like that, and the ones that are less successful, we cut. Yeah, painful.
Comment on how teaching marketing has changed in your career?
How teaching marketing has changed? That's right. We don't have chalkboards anymore, right? I can remember chalkboards, so I can't remember stone tablets. You have to tell me about it. I think teaching is the saying is that if somebody came from 500 years ago and they dropped into Bangkok, they would not know what to do. They would be totally confused. But if they were to stumble their way into this room, they would feel right at home. So lecture rooms have scarcely changed in 300 or 400 years. And I think that will soon change. But I don't want to be subversive. Anything else?
Is there any new development in the space between offline and online? I've seen people trying to convert digital media to offline sales.
Yeah, I actually think the distinction between online and offline would gradually disappear. So we know that people, when they're shopping offline, are actually, of course, have their mobile with them, and they're doing searches as they're looking at the product offline. We also know when people are online that they're storing information so they can go to the store to see it. People still don't really trust, some people, for some products, don't fully trust online media.
Can you measure the impact of your media on the offline sales?
Sure. They're making huge strides on that. So Google is now integrating offline transactions into Google Analytics. So I can have a way to both measure online and offline. And I can do other things like, for example, e-coupons, which enable me to, if you come into my store and you quote a particular coupon number or you show me a coupon on your device, I give you a discount. That then enables me to link your offline behavior to your online behavior. I think it's Macy's that have got a quite sophisticated thing I was talking to you about. Quite a sophisticated mobile app where basically you have a wish list of stuff that you want to buy, and if you're within X meters of the store, it will send you updates on that stuff. So it will tell you this product's on sale. You said you're interested in it. It's on sale, but by the way, there's only 7 left. So yeah, I think pretty soon we'll see a blending of online and offline. Can I stop now?
Everyone's getting hungry.